Well, today we're going to be doing something a little bit different. We're not going to actually be making or painting anything. We're going to be looking at what you use to make and paint things with. Is that good English? Don't know. So I thought I'd run through. I get a lot of people asking me, what brushes do you use, what paint do you use, what knives do you use. So I thought we'd just do a little run through of the various paints, glues, brushes that are available. Obviously the first thing you need when doing any sort of painting is a little cat. Ow. Bless her. She likes to get involved. So we'll do each bit in turn. So what should we look at first? Okay, so I thought we'd look at paints first. So I keep quite a few being attacked. Look. You're attacking my arm. Ah! This is what I have when I do any sort of modelling. I get attacked by wild animals. So paints, yes, paints. So the paints I use the most are probably your good old. Let's create some room. Push back. A good old Citadels. And Citadels, they're available in places like Games Workshop, on the internet. They're great paints for mini painting because they're really high pigment. They have good value for money. So a little pot like this, about £3.50, something like that. They last forever. They seal well, and as we go through the paints, this is a big thing. That if you want to get your money out of your paint, it's got a seal, and there are a few things you can do to help that. So like on these style of paints, you can scrape out your lid. You can scrape out all around there because it builds up, and as soon as you're not making a seal, your paint's going to go dry. At worst, it will dry out, but what happens is it gets thicker and thicker, and then it doesn't flow, it doesn't adhere properly. So keep your paints, your paint pots in good condition. It pays dividends in the long run. Citadel do a whole, it's basically a painting system. I don't tend to use it in the way that they would suggest. So they do different versions. So they do base coats, and that's for obviously doing a base coat. And then they do layers. So the layer paints are a bit more liquidy than the base coat, and a bit less pigmenty, so a bit less opaque, a bit more transparent. That's the word I'm looking for. And the idea is you paint your base coat yellow, so assuming these are all yellow, you paint your base coat yellow, you then layer yellow on top of it. You've got shades to go into the crevices, and then you've got dry brushing. They're dry brush paints I do not like. They just dry out immediately. You're better off just using normal paint and drying it on a tissue. But these are great for mini paintings. Their colour range is brilliant, like I say, cheap, easy to use. Their shades are great as well, so as you'll see in my videos, I use Reichland Flesh Shade for just about everything. It's a great all-round shade. You can use it for pretty much anything you want, but they do other ones. So they do, like, this is a red shade, so it's great for doing red stuff, and they do other ones like Newland Oil, which is a great black shade. We'll talk about this sort of stuff as well. Actually, we might as well cover it now. So there's two different types of shade if you want to do black. So say you want to do panel lines or oil, stuff like that. You've got acrylics, so these are water based, and then you've also got things like the MIG, and these are non-water based. These are like, I suppose, alcohol or thinner based enamel paints. Now these flow so much better into crevices, so if you're doing panel lines, this stuff is amazing. But if you're doing figures, sometimes this can overpower, and it takes forever to dry, whereas Citadel shades dries really quickly, great on figures. So figures, scenery or panels or spaceships, that's the main difference. Also with enamel paints, which I don't use enamel paints particularly, you've got to clean them in thinners, you can't do it in water. But So that's your Citadels, which I use all the time. The other ones I use are Vallejo. That's not the Vallejo. Picked up the wrong bottle because I'm looking through the camera. Vallejo. And these do a range of acrylic colours, and they do different ones. They do model colour, which are great for figures, good pigmentation, much thinner than Citadel paints, so sometimes you have to use 2 or 3 coats. But they also do a range of airbrush colours, and they're called, if I've got one here, Model Air, you see. And these are brilliant because these you can use in an airbrush without thinning. Some people do thin them, but like if you're doing silver, like a couple of drops, it's really value for money. You can buy nice sets of Vallejo paints sort of grouped together. So that's your Vallejos. A bit more expensive than Citadel, but they do go quite a long way. Army Painter have brought out their own range of paints, and they look like the Vallejo ones. I think they're all right. They're good basic paints. The flesh is good, but I find their pigmentation isn't as good. You've got to do several coats. If you're doing little figures, they seem great for that. But otherwise, I'm not sold on them. They are dirt cheap though, so that's always a good thing. And then this range I've tried recently. I bought a set on eBay, and they're called Dungeons and Dragons, and these are by Army Painters. And you buy them in like a set, and then you get a miniature and that. They're not very big, but the pigmentation in them is amazing. The only trouble is they suggest basically when you first start squeezing it out, you'll get clear liquid, and they say get rid of that until you get colour. No, give it a shake, because that's the medium that's thinning that paint down. So if you keep doing that, these are going to dry out something shocking. So give them a good shake. I know some people put ball bearings in. You can actually buy bags of ball bearings to put in paint. I never do that, can't be asked. But yeah, these are good. I've got a whole range of these, and I'm really enjoying using them. So just it gets me down though that it's the same price as like Vallejo almost, but you only get half the stuff. But they do cover well, so that's a good thing. So Revel paints, or Revel paints, depending on whether you were down south or up north. These are okay, but I don't tend to use them anymore. I've got a whole sort of shed load of them. They're the sort of paints you would use when you first start out modelling, because you go to the model shop, you buy a Revel kit, and then you do Revel paint. And then you rapidly realise that Revel kits are aimed more at the toy market. It's a bit of a giveaway that Revel kits never ever include figures with them. If you buy an airplane, you get no pilot or anything. And their paints are the same. They're aimed at the toy market. They do a really good military range. Their mattes are okay. Their gloss paints are awful. And the only trouble with these is, since they put them in these ridiculous pots, is, yeah, you can't tip them over, but they just don't seal. So your paints don't last 5 minutes. I've sort of stopped using them, except where I've got a few colours that I used to use and sort of still do. The other one to avoid like a plague is Humbrol. Some people like them. I think they're rubbish paints. Again, you buy them in toy shops a lot more than you do in model shops. They're just not great. When they used to be Airfix paints, they used to be better, but when they were bought out by Humbrol, I think in the sort of mid-80s, and then they changed all their colours over. Good range, dirt cheap, but just not good at all. You'll end up doing 5 or 6 coats, get annoyed because it goes on too thick. And that's sort of it for paints at the moment. Other than, Tamiya, or if you're American, Tamiya. Really good paints, great for airbrushing, absolutely horrible for anything else. They're not enamel paints, they're acrylic paints, but they're alcohol based. So if you open it and start painting, these dry out very quickly. Their coverage isn't good when you're brush painting. You get, especially on like the black, flat black, you have to do 2 or 3 coats, otherwise you get some bits are shinier than others. You've really got to keep mixing them. So mix it, do a bit of paint, mix, do a bit of paint, mix. I got a few because they do some lovely pre-mixed military colours. But the only ones I really use a great deal of are their metallics like silver or gold. because they seem to work really well. But for normal colours, unless you're airbrushing, I probably wouldn't bother. But yeah, that's about it for paints really. I've got some really odd, weird ones kicking about where I've picked them up from different sets that I might use. But generally, it works down from that. Citadel, if you haven't got Citadel, use Vallejo. If you haven't got Vallejo, use Army Painter. If you've got Army Painter, then probably use Tamiya. Just don't. I wouldn't bother buying Humbrol or Revel. Toy paints really don't hold much water. The other thing that I obviously use a lot of is varnish, and the varnish I use is this stuff, and it's Ducraft's Artiste, and you get them in hobbycraft and hobby shops rather than model shops. But by golly, these are good varnishes. So they do a gloss, they do a matte. It's like £2.74 for a big tub. The matte is incredibly matte. The gloss goes on really well. They're great. I don't normally use hobby stuff because it's generally not great for miniatures, but the varnish, really good. Okay, so brushes. Brushes are an interesting one because they don't last forever. You get a favourite brush and you use it and use it and use it, and then eventually the bristles will clog up, or you'll accidentally forget to wash it and you'll have a solid pokey stick. But people ask me what brushes I use, and I use a whole range of them. There's some to avoid and some that are great. So let's have a look. Ones to avoid. Focus on that. Humbrol Airfix. You get them with kits. They're one-off brushes. You can do a little bit. The bristles almost immediately you first clean it will start to come out, will start to spread. You get this sort of thing happens on them. See the end there? They're not great. There you go. That one's done the same. If you've got nothing else, use them, but I wouldn't go my way to buy a Humbrol or Airfix brush. Just again, toy. I mean, look how bent that is. Isn't it? It's just rubbish. Then you've got a brand I do like, which is, you see that, Army Painter, and they do them in various ones. This is super detail. Look at that. Can you see the end is tiny? These are great. They're not expensive really. I think it's about £4 a brush. They last quite well, but they're really hard wearing. I like their detail one. I use that a lot. One that I use almost for everything these days is a good basic brush, and I can't even read it. It's Boldmere, and these are available from the Range, which is a sort of a, if you're not in the UK, it's a weird old-fashioned style department store, and they've got a hobby section, and they sell these. I think Hobbycraft as well sell them. They're about £2.75 for a brush. They're designed for painting pictures, acrylic paint brushes. They're great. I always grab a few when I'm in there. They don't last long. I'm not a great one for looking after my brushes, but they don't last long. They do tend to start spraying, but they're cheap enough that if you get half a dozen uses out of it, you've made your money on it. But yeah, I like them. We did the Army Painter. Army Painter. So after the super detail, they do one called Insane Detail, which is just mad. But I find the smaller it gets, the harder it is, because it doesn't hold as much paint, so it dries almost instantly. They also do the range of Dungeons and Dragons ones. These came with the Dungeons and Dragons paints. They seem like the same Army Painter brush, to be honest. These ones, this is the Royal again. So this is from the Range and Hobbycraft. These are their, I think they do a dark brown one, which I think is for watercolor and acrylic, and then they do a light bristle one, which is just for acrylic. They, again, great brushes. Get yourself some pointy detail ones, but also for dry brushing, get yourself some flat ones. With the flat ones, with the dry brushing ones, again, Royal, see, I love them. With the flat ones, it doesn't really matter what. I mean, this one's a De La Rowney, which is like a very posh acrylic painting type brush. They're great for dry brushing, and it doesn't matter really. You could even use humble ones if you wanted to. But yeah, get yourself a good brush. And I've got like just so many different sizes, right up to a massive. If you're doing spaceships and things like that, or terrain, get yourself a massive one as well. I think this was a Winsor Newton one. They're really good. But yeah, invest in a brush, you won't look back. Glues then. So various different types of glue, and depending on what you're gluing is what glue you would use. That sounds obvious, but I see a lot on sort of forums and that where people say, oh, I've bought a polystyrene kit, what glue shall I use? Well, you probably use polystyrene cement. But let's go through them. So your standard, so if you buy a kit and you get some paints and some glue, generally you'll end up getting something like this, probably a little bottle. And this is Revell Contactor Professional. It's not bad glue, to be honest. It takes a while to dry. You do get a fine tip nozzle. I mean, I've not used this one in so long. It's the tip's stuck on. There we go. So you get a very fine tip nozzle, so you can pinpoint place it. But like I say, it does take a while to dry. So if you're gluing something, you've got to hold it there or position it, glue it. But you do get a really good joint. And the way these polystyrene cements work is they melt the two plastic parts, and then that mingles together, and that gives you a really good solid joint, as opposed to something like super glue, which works differently, which I'll get into in a second. So for any polystyrene work, use polystyrene cement. Some people do use super glue, but it's easier to use stuff like this. If you are using this though, this is good, but I would highly recommend getting yourself some EMA plastic weld. This stuff, it's liquid, so liquid cement. So it's. I mean, I probably can't show you because it's liquid. Let's have a look. See, it's a liquid, and you brush this on. So you just use the brush, dip it in, run it into the part. And what the way you use this is you can coat each part and put them together, but what you'd normally do is position the part in place and then run that into it. It's almost instant dry, instant bond, super stuff. This stuff does everything except for probably ABS, which you need special glue for. But yeah, EMA plastic weld, great stuff. Use it in a well ventilated area though. It does stink. You will get a headache if you leave it off, and if you leave the top off, it will evaporate and you'll have lost it. The other glue that a lot of people use, super glue. So you got various different glues, and being attacked by a play person, otherwise known as CA glue or cyanoacrylate glue. You get just various different ones, Loctite, super glue, etc. And the way this works is you put a layer, coat one side, put it together, or if it's high viscous, you put it together, run it in the joint, and it's almost instant. Although if you are using super glue, get yourself some accelerator, because it just makes it so much easier. So you either spray the accelerator on, put the glue on, and it will instantly bond, or you glue it, spray the accelerator on, and get an instant glue. If you're building stuff quickly, like when I did the sailing ship, it's just saves so much time. Gorilla super glue, really good. Impressed with this. Not cheap. That's about £8 or something stupid. But this is, again, like the paints, great. You got to have it closed top, otherwise it dries out. So stuff like these, I mean, I think that way you can see that one's dried out. Look. So they're cheaper, but you get one job and they're gone. A lot of people buy the little Poundland tubes, use them. They're okay for foam and stuff, but I wouldn't use them on plastics or anything like that. Yeah, but that's super glue, so it doesn't melt the surfaces together. It puts a layer which dries out. Something that I'm experimenting with, and it's really good for certain applications, is UV resin. So basically what happens is you can drip this onto something, put a UV light onto it, and it instantly sets. You can use it as glue. It's not very precise, and I'd more use it when you're building dioramas, things like that, but it is instant. So what you've got to have the UV torch with it, instantly done. This stuff's really good. This came as a set, and it's this was from Screwfix, and it's designed for joining mitre corners for doing framing, wooden framing. But oh god, it's good stuff. This was like, I think it was about a tenner for both of these, and the glue is so good. Really smells though, but yeah, Screwfix does that. Well worth it. But that's glues really. So some various odds and ends. So filler, I use Humbrol, which I know I've badmouthed them all along. Their filler is actually really nice. It's a really quick dry in. It covers really well. It sands beautifully. If you're doing a large amount of fill in a large area, Humbrol, that's about a £5 for a tube. I always keep about 3 or 4 tubes in stock because they do, like this one, it's gone a bit off. It gums up. I've yet to get a full tube's worth out of anything. Does smell a bit, but it's the only thing I would recommend with Humbrol is their filler. It's good stuff. Vallejo do a filler, plastic putty filler. This one is superb. It comes with a precision nozzle. It's white. Is it going to come out? No. Yep, there we go. So you can see, I don't know if it's going to focus. You can get precision for little figures and that. This is great stuff. It dries quick. It sands really well. It does sink though. So if you're doing panel lines, you might have to do 2 or 3 applications. But oh, I'm enjoying this one. It's one I'm liking. For larger stuff, I'd use something like Milliput, 2-part epoxy putty, which I don't have any at the moment, so I can't show you. But I normally keep a stock of it. That's good stuff. If you're covering a large thing, or if you're doing like a foam helmet or something like that, I'd just buy some cheap caulking as in caulking for sealant stuff. That covers really well and sands well. So that's about it. Obviously keep a good supply of cocktail sticks and stirrers. These things are great. Micro applicators, and they're like tiny, let me grab one, tiny earbuds. Yeah, it's not going to focus. They're great. They're great for panel lines. So you just dip them in, touch it on, it works. Poundland, I think that these from. Super fine. So get yourself some of them. Cocktail sticks, old bits of sprue. I have used my paintbrush handles for stirring before. I wouldn't really recommend it. You get an accurate. For cleaning brushes, I just use clean water, paper towel. If it's end of the painting session, I just use some thinner. So even if you've been using water when your brush looks clean, I mean, I can sort of show this. Let me get a bit of paper towel. So my brush that I use all the time, where's he gone? There he is. So looks pretty clean, but if I put them in some thinner, loosen it up, you'll see. Okay, you see how much paint clogs up, and that's in the base of the bristles. And all of that's going to start splaying your brush. You're going to lose that nice fine tip. Just wash it off afterwards. There you go. Back to good as new. Yeah, so at the end of your painting session, or just randomly, if you're bored, clean all your brushes with thinner and they'll last forever. The other things that you might need are a decent pair of side cutters. Pick these up cheaply. So when you're removing things from a sprue, never ever twist it off like I used to do when I was a little kid. So what you do is you go in, clip the part off, then you can tidy it up properly. If you twist it off, you're going to leave a gouge in the model or you're going to break something, it's just not worth it. About £4 for a pair of them, well worth it. The other thing I would suggest is keep a tidy workstation. I don't. Mine is very messy, but every time I tidy up I lose everything. I can't find it. So I work in a very messy way. A good cutting board, well worthwhile, which I also use as palette. Mix everything on here. I used to use a tile as a palette, but then I lost it on House Move and I've never bothered again. So as you can see, look at this, like a Jackson Pollock. But the main thing I would say is experiment, do what you want to do. It's not, there's no rules to the hobby. If you make your kit and paint it using, you know, animal dung, if that's what you want to do and you enjoy doing it, knock yourself out, get on with it. But yeah, that's just some of the stuff I do, and like I say, it might not be right for you. Have fun. It's meant to be a fun hobby. I often see comments on like forums and on Facebook now where people say, I'm getting into the hobby and I've bought a kit and it says I need 83 different colours of paint. No, you don't. Get yourself some basics, learn to mix, get a colour wheel, which you can just download offline, you know, or look online. Learn to mix. I'm presuming these people never played with plasticine when they were kids because you couldn't afford every colour, so you mixed your own. Well, I hope that was enjoyable for you. Not making a kit, but going through some of the stuff I use. You don't need all this straight away. This is like 40 years worth of building up stuff and ways to do it. And there'll be odd little bits you'll need and you need to go out and buy it, but my sort of theory on modelling is make, do, amend. If the end result is good, doesn't matter how you got there, you know, and it's you to decide what good looks like. Don't let anyone ever sort of moan at you. Don't let the rivet counters put you off. You should enjoy it. And if you're not enjoying it, find another hobby, because what is the point? But thanks for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed it. If you want to see more things like this or more going into detail or like showing you what different brushes do when you're painting on it, I can certainly do that. Let me know in the comments, and please like and subscribe if you want to see more modelling videos. Thanks then, bye.